Welcome to the Red and Bold Show. I am Marc Adams. I'm one of the hosts of this show, and I'm joined by my co-host, Anthony Robertson of 49ers Cutback. How's it going, Ant?
It's going well. The rookies have reported for camp, and that means that we are officially on the clock, and the 2024 season is upon us. And that's exactly what we've been waiting for, the long break of time where we were basically without any new content is over. And now that we're going to get to actual football, actual practices next week, training camp kicks off. And then it's just full go at seeing what this team can be in 2024. And boy, am I excited for that because I'm missing football in a big time way. And I think getting out the training camp and seeing it's going to be huge. And what's up, Freddie? I see you and Chad. Always good to have Freddie McDre in the house.
Yeah, it's that time. I mean, next week, this time next week, we'll have real stuff to talk about. So excited about that. And here's a weird thing. I just when we went live, I always do this live, on YouTube and on Twitter or X. But I just saw this notification that you have to have a premium account now to go live on X, which is the dumbest, stupidest thing. But oh well, we'll see. So sorry for that little side note. Just got flustered and frustrated there for a second. We're going to talk about 49ers rookie training camp storylines. But before we get into that, a couple of things. First is that a report came down that Brandon Ayuk has requested a trade. Are you concerned about this, or are we still, on those lines that, hey, it doesn't matter. They're not going to trade Brandon Ayuk. He's going to play. If they don't come to an agreement, he's going to play on that fifth year. We'll see what happens in spring of 2025. But he's for sure playing for the 49ers this coming season. Where are you at on that?
Yeah, I think the 49ers are somewhat playing hardball with Brandon Ayuk, and I think that they see him at a certain category. They see him as a top 10 wide receiver, and the rankings came out from, the ESPN today that put him in, as far as executives, coaches, and scouts, as number 10 in the top 10. And that's what me and you have been talking about over the last several weeks, is that's what they want to pay him. $26 million will put him in that range, and I don't think they've been willing to budge. So I think Brandon Ayuk, once again, this is another case where he's trying to create leverage. He's trying to create an opportunity for him to get that number where he wants it to be. But I don't think the 49ers are playing this game of chicken with Brandon Ayuk. I think they're just letting this thing happen and knowing that when training camp comes, either number 11 is going to be out there or he's going to be facing $40,000 a day that he misses in fines. Now, he could also just hold in and avoid fines, but at some point he's going to have to come to the conclusion either that he's playing on the fifth-year option because he doesn't want to risk losing close to $1 million per game, or he's going to have to go to where the 49ers are at and meet them and agree to that contract. So at some point, something's going to get figured out, whether it's him playing for fifth-year option or if he's going to get an extension. But I don't think this move has put Brandon Ayuk any closer to getting a deal, and I don't think the 49ers are really going to be wavered from what they've already decided as far as what they believe Brandon Ayuk's worth. And I think they're at the point now where they can't really give in.
Yeah, and it's strange, and I don't know if this is a popular opinion or not, but I'm going to say it anyway. I love Brandon Ayuk. I think that he's a huge part of the 49ers offense. I saw a thing today that said that 80-something% of his catches last year went for touchdowns or first downs. So he's big time. But if they're thinking about paying him $30 million a year, man, I don't think that he's worth that. Where are you at on that?
I wouldn't pay him $30 million a year. And I know that, when you look at Justin Jefferson and you look at some of the other guys, that's where the money's headed. But I think the 49ers know that's not what they can do and then be able to sustain success with the players that are on offense, the players that are on defense, that they're going to need to keep this from being a rebuilding project down the road. They know they've got other money that's going to be allocated. So it may not appear like a lot of money to some, but $4 million a year is pretty impactful. That could be 3 role players. That could be a guy, that's on a second year contract or whatever you're having to do. So to me, this is one of those things where it could be hugely impactful. You want Brandon Ayuk on the team. I don't think anyone's wavered from that. We all love Ayuk. We love the things that he does in this offense and what he adds. And really, there's not another player on the team right now that adds those type of skills on the outside. So to me, I mean, they need Ayuk, but Ayuk is under contract for his 5th year. He's not a free agent. And so $14.1 million is what the 49ers are willing to pay him this year unless he agrees to their terms. And they hold leverage right now, and they're going to use that leverage. At some point, could Ayuk just hold out? He could. But at what point does he just have to succumb to the belief that, you know what, the 49ers, they're just not budging on this, and I'm just going to have to play it out and see what happens.
Well, speaking of expensive receivers, there was a guy today. What did you say his name is? Pretty Ricky?
Pretty Ricky, yeah.
Pretty Ricky. Let me see if I could find this. He posted this today that, let's see, here it is. The Raiders are a team interested in trading for Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk knows Antonio Pierce from ASU. Here's the fun part. The Raiders would send Davante Adams to the Niners in any trade. Davante has no real money on his deal after this season. All right, so here's the question. Would you take Davante Adams over Brandon Ayuk? That's the first part of the question. Number 2, do you think there's any way this happens?
Well, the first part of this is I've wanted Davante Adams on the 49ers since the draft. I've been very much a Davante Adams guy. So I got to admit that there's a little bit of bias when I talk about Davante Adams because I just always thought he was going to be that dude, and he's proven to be that dude. He's a legit number 1 wide receiver in this league. He's a top 5 wide receiver. So when you're talking about production, winning one-on-ones, the defenses go in preparing to stop Davante Adams, whatever team he's on. So he's never played with a cast of characters like the 49ers have. So that would make it really interesting with him within this 49ers offense. He's a guy that can catch 100 yards. He's had 6 seasons where he's had double-digit touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk has had 0. And I know that that's not fair to Ayuk because if you put Ayuk in a pass-centric offense where he's the main target, he probably would have a lot more production. But you just look at the stats, you look at the ability, and you're like, wow, yeah, he would be one of those guys that made sense if you're trading Ayuk. The problem is he's going to turn 32 in December, and he's probably closer to the end of his career than he is the beginning. But he's hyper-competitive. He's a leader by all aspects and a player that plays a really high level of football. I think the problem with this trade potentially is, number 1, he does have an out after the end of the year that the 49ers could exercise. So you're talking about a 1-year deal potentially unless you rip it up and you create a new deal. So you're kind of in the same situation. Ayuk for 1 year, Davante Adams for 1 year. And what's the kicker? Because I don't think the Raiders make a straight across trade 1-for-1. They're going to want something back. What is that? Is that a 4th? Is that a 5th? And are you willing to do that? The money is pretty close this season, except the Raiders have to eat money. That's why I think a draft pick has to go back. So it would be probably a 1-year rental for Davante Adams. I think it's an upgrade as far as player, but you lose as far as age and you lose as far as longevity of getting an IU contract done and him being in San Francisco. So it's an interesting proposition. I also wonder if Davante Adams will block as well as Brandon Ayuk because I haven't really seen him asked to do that a whole lot, and that's a huge aspect to what the 49ers want from a wide receiver.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. I mean, Davante Adams is legit. Obviously, he was better when he was younger. He was better when he had Aaron Rodgers. But, hey, I think that I would take him. I mean, if we talk Ayuk long-term versus Adams as a 1-year rental, then I don't know. But I don't know. Maybe Davante Adams pushes them over the top. He definitely would back in February in the Super Bowl. He would have been probably the difference. So let me get to this question here. Somebody's asking, does that mean that the Niners are going to franchise tag? I don't know if they're talking about Ayuk or
it would have to
Adams
be Ayuk. Yeah, I would, after the season, the 49ers would definitely franchise tag Brandon Ayuk and then go ahead and trade him off the franchise tag because, number one, it means if a team wants to come and sign him, depending on what designation you make that franchise tag, they're going to have to pay you in draft picks and also pay Brandon Ayuk, and you get firm compensation, but you can also trade players that are on that. Look at Brian Burns last season, who was on franchise tag when he was traded. It just gives you the ability to have the rights to him. And if he decides that he wants to, stay in San Francisco or they can't work out a trade, then next year he plays for between $23 and $25 million, which is still less than the $26 million they offered him. So to me, it's not a crazy thought to think Brandon Ayuk is not going to be here in 2025, even on the current contract, the way it is because of the franchise tag.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And like we've been talking, I mean, a lot of people have been mentioning the fact that Ayuk has no leverage. He may be doing what he can to try to get leverage, and requesting a trade is kind of the thing that they seem to do these days, but it's not going to work. They're not going to trade him. If they do, it's going to be for another player who can help the team this year. But even then, in Davante Adams is better than Brandon Ayuk in my opinion, but he doesn't know this offense like Ayuk does. I mean, he played in Green Bay, but is he going to know it like Ayuk? And like you mentioned, is he going to be as willing to block? Is he going to be as good at blocking? Because in Kyle Shanahan's offense, he has to do that. He may not have had to do that much in Green Bay, but he would have to do that in San Francisco.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things would be, as you see, in our comments over here in our chat, people are talking about what Davante Adams' attention he gets from defenses, and that's the whole difference. Right? We had Matt Mayoko on, and he talked about Ayuk being fourth as far as teams game planning to stop the 49ers. Davante Adams would scream up the board to 1 or 2, and if you're not doing that, and the way that teams bracket coverage him, he could go off. And I think that's the big difference. It's a proven commodity who his press releases are second to none. His attention to detail, second to none. His film work, second to none. He's a pro by every sense of the word. And so I think he would pick up this offense extremely fast. And if he got a full training camp, if they pulled the trigger on this thing before camp, well, then he would definitely fit in. The questions are going to be, he still garners a lot of respect in Las Vegas, and he has a lot of pull within that organization. He would have to sign off on this. They're not going to just let him go, and he's got to decide. Yes, he's from the Bay Area. Him and his wife both went, to Fresno State, so he's from the area. That makes sense, but does he want to leave his home in Las Vegas where his kids go to school and things like that? There's a lot more to this, and so I think it would be interesting. And I think this is the first time there's been a legitimate option as far as trading Brandon Ayuk, because we've talked about this a lot. You have to get something back that's going to help you in 2024. And I think Davante Adams would be that guy. I don't think a lot of the other trades that we've seen come down really make sense for the 49ers, especially anything that has to do with draft picks. Why wait till 2025 when you can win a Super Bowl in 2024?
Raphael asks, would Adams demand double team in this offense? Yeah, go ahead. I think all we have to do is go back to 2021. I know that was 3 years ago, but that game in San Francisco against the Packers, Davante Adams beat the 49ers. I mean, you remember, like, at the end of that game, everybody knew that Aaron Rodgers was going to throw the ball to Davante Adams. He had very little time, and in like 3 throws, got the Packers into field goal range. They kicked the field goal, won it. It was all Davante Adams. That guy, I think, would still demand double teams.
100%. I mean, just watching the receiver show, he talked about the fact Jimmy Garoppolo had to get used to just the looks as far as coverage that he was going to see, because there's nothing he's ever seen, because you just have to play him different. Wink Martindale called him the best wide receiver in the league. And so these are guys who have to play him a certain way. And if you're not allowed to do that, well, that means Davante Adams goes off. If you do that, that means guys like Debo and Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle get looks that are even more appealing for them. So in that case, I mean, it's a different level of player. And I like Ayuk, but you're talking about, a guy who's top 5 compared to a guy that's top 10. There's a little bit of difference there. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the 49ers still, it's going to take a lot to get this deal done. If there was even a conversation about it, I don't know how serious it actually is. And I think the best case scenario is still that Brandon Ayuk stays, because I think it's more, it's could be long term. It could be someone, like you said, within the system that already understands it. So I think that's kind of the feeling I have, is it will stay that way. But if something happened and Devontae Adams and Brandon Ayuk were swapped, I think it could change the dynamic of the 49ers. And we do know they did call about Justin Jefferson, at least to take an idea. So they're not against adding to their football team. Just with all things, what's the price? Is it worth it? And in this case, we'll find out if there's something here. I don't know if there's smoke or fire. We just know that right now there's a tweet.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot of discussion for a tweet that in which he went out of his way to say this is just a rumor. So this probably is not going to happen, but it still is kind of fun to talk about. And I'd love to have Devontae Adams. But anyway, what we're going to talk about today is 49ers rookies reported yesterday. And so want to talk about some of the storylines surrounding the rookies in training camp this summer. So let's jump in and discuss this. The first thing is that we heard yesterday that the 49ers have put Ricky Pearsall on the non-football related injury list. Now, I don't entirely know what that means. I do remember that back in the mandatory minicamp, I think it was, he was wearing a blue non-contact jersey. So I don't know if he got injured in the spring or if he did something. I guess if it's a non-football related, then he must have gotten injured away from the practice, I would assume. So I don't know if this was in a workout or a basketball game or he tripped over something at home. I don't know. Have you heard anything about this? Is this something that we should be concerned about? Because right now, for me, this is the number one story surrounding the rookies coming into training camp.
Yeah, I think it was a little surprising that Ricky Pearsall was put on NFI, and it definitely means he got injured in training or something that was, not in the 49ers organization. And we know that the 49ers are required to, make these claims and put these things out there. The NFL requires that they do it if players are injured. So that's the first case. I did see Matt Barrows and Matt Mayoko both say, from what they heard, it was nothing serious. So we'll see what happens, if Pearsall's ready to go. Maybe he'll be ready to go, a week from now at training camp, and they can activate him at any time. But this is just one of the normal procedural things. I'm hoping it's nothing significant, and it seems like it's not. So Pearsall will be available at some point, at training camp. I'm hoping it's from the start, because I know I'd like to get a glimpse of him and see how he's operating, and especially once we get into pads. But right now, really what he's missing is he's just going to be missing some of the on-field work where they're working on conditioning right now for the rookies and getting them established and ready. So that way, when they get to training camp, they're ready to go and they don't have to worry about anything like that. So that's what he's going to be missing. I don't think it's very significant. He can still be in all the meetings and all of that. So to me, this is right now a nothing. But at some point, if he's not coming back right away, it could turn into something. But at least early reports seem like it's not that serious.
Yeah, if this was Deebo Samuel, I don't think that I'd be sweating it at all, because I would just, he has plenty of time to heal up whatever is ailing him. But when it's a rookie wide receiver, I think that we've just seen too many of those. Go back to AJ Jenkins. Now, he wasn't any good, but you go back to guys, especially as rookies, when they come in, they get injured, and sometimes it seems like they don't quite ever get back on track. Javon Kinlaw was drafted and he was already injured. He had that knee issue and he never really became what he was expected. Last year, he was pretty healthy and had a good season, but so that's the only thing that I worry about, is that a rookie right out of the gate, hopefully, like you said, he's ready to go next week, because I'd hate for him to get too far behind. That's going to impact his rookie season.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what could be interesting is all the talk this season has been about the end of the wide receiver room. Well, can you imagine this? Brandon Ayuk is holding out, and Ricky Pearsall is not available for practice, and day one of training camp, Danny Gray is taking first team reps at X receiver. It's not far fetched at this point. And so that's going to be a little bit interesting. And, I mean, it does give opportunities. I know people are saying that, and it does. It gives opportunities to other players to be able to step in and seize the day and maybe go out there and prove that they're capable of making this 49ers 53-man roster. But I don't want other guys getting the reps as much as I want to see those guys get better. I want Ricky Pearsall getting reps, and I want Brandon Ayuk getting reps because I want them to be ready to go when the season starts, because those are the guys that are going to contribute to the 49ers in 2024. And so even though it is good for those other guys to get reps, the likelihood is if he's not ready to go by training camp starting, the 49ers are going to bring in another receiver to get some reps, at least until he comes back. So it's interesting, but yeah, I'd rather have our guys out there. But I will be watching, and if Danny Gray's out there, maybe we'll get a better look at where he's at, and we can get a clear picture on if he's actually going to be able to compete to make this team.
So the next storyline is Jacob Cowing's role. It's going to be interesting to watch and see how they use him. When we had Matt Mayoko a couple of weeks ago, he talked about how he kind of sees Jacob Cowing in that Danny Gray role that Gray never took advantage of. And so is he going to be that speedster that gets a handful of catches in the season? Might he have a bigger role? Maybe the Pearsall injury opens up a door for Cowing. But what do you think about Jacob Cowing's role going into training camp? Where do you think this is all going to turn out once he gets in there?
I think Kyle's going to have some specific looks for him that he's going to want to use. I think they're going to want to get him the ball in some screens and maybe a couple, reverses and plays like that. Things that use his dynamic speed. But he also has pretty good route running ability. So getting him in the slot occasionally against bad matchups, whether that's a team, that plays a guy that used to play safety. Like if you play the Rams and they've got Carnell Lake out there, that could be a tremendous matchup for Ricky Pearsall or for Jacob Cowing. But those are the type of situations I see. Plus, you get certain looks, and then all of a sudden you run that slot fade, and we know that's been a bugaboo for the 49ers defense. Well, it could also be a weakness for other defenses around the league as well. So there's going to be key opportunities to use Jacob Cowing. The question is, how much is it going to be? I don't know. I don't know how much opportunities he's going to have to really be able to use his skill set in year one. But I think Kyle will find some here and there where we'll see moments where like, all right, Cowing, he's got something there. And then, of course, if there's injury, then he will have opportunities. So I think he's got a particular set of plays that he wants to use him in, some gadgets, some matchups, and that's what Kyle will try to use him to take advantage of.
This wasn't one of the storylines, but I want to get to Leon's question because it does deal with the rookies. He says if an NFL undrafted free agent gets drafted in the UFL, does NFL have contractual priority? If the undrafted free agent sticks on an NFL roster, did the UFL team waste a pick? How does this work? And then he follows that up with asking about UFL draft because Schrader, Mordecai, and I believe Anderson got drafted by UFL teams, wondering how that works. Yeah, they all three were drafted. Anderson, Mordecai, Schrader, and there was somebody else, offensive
Mays.
lineman. Yeah. And so I have no idea how that works. My assumption, based on things like the Canadian Football League, the USFL back in the day, my assumption would be that if a team in the UFL drafted a player on an NFL roster, that player is going to be able to decide. Now, if they sign a multi-year contract with an NFL team, I think that makes the decision for them. But if it's a situation like an undrafted free agent who doesn't have a long-term deal or multi-year deal, I would think that if they were cut by an NFL team, then they're free to go play in the UFL. But if they make the team, obviously you'd rather play on an NFL team than a UFL team. But I don't really know how that works. I mean, we've seen in the past where, you have a guy like Bo Jackson um, who refused to be drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or refused to go play for them. And then the Raiders ended up getting the rights to him later down the road because Bo went to play baseball first. You had a situation where Deion Sanders played both sports. And so I don't remember how those contracts worked then, but I'm guessing that the NFL team is going to have the priority, not only for the player, but contractually as well. But look, if Cody Schrader doesn't make the team and nobody else picks him up, then he's going to be playing in the UFL probably this next spring.
Yeah, I mean, teams, the CFL will have their draft and they will draft players as well. Basically, they own the rights. So if that player decides to come to their league, then he's going to play for a particular football team. So, yeah, I mean, the NFL is always going to have, the first dibs because the players want to make more money. The reason that you had the USFL back in the day poaching some of the players was the amount of money that they were paying. Guys like Steve Young getting $50 million contracts back then was huge. And so they went to play that way. Well, in this case, you brought it up perfectly. You got guys that got drafted, and the 49ers had, a couple guys taken, especially like Schrader taken in the second round. That means he's got a priority within the UFL. But the problem is, more than likely, he's going to end up on a practice squad. And if he's on the practice squad, he'll probably get a futures deal. And teams don't want to lose those players, and they make more money playing on a NFL practice squad than they do playing for the UFL right now. Yeah. So I just don't think, it's nothing to worry about. I thought what was interesting was kind of the positions that they were taking. You had Tanner Mordecai going in the 9th round of the UFL draft. You had Cody Schrader going in the 2nd, Evan Anderson going in the 3rd. So you had some value to these players. And I don't think the UFL is wasting picks. And so I think that they believe there's an opportunity for these guys to fall to the UFL. So I think that's why they're drafting them. So it's interesting when you're talking about undrafted free agents and where they could potentially land. And then some of the conversation that's been going on, around the 49ers about guys like Evan Anderson or Schrader and Tanner Mordecai, even, that they're really not only going to make the 49ers, but they're going to make an impact. I think it's interesting to see how the UFL valued them.
Yeah. And I mean, all we have to do is go back a handful of months. I remember you making the statement about Cody Schrader that he's only a couple of injuries away from playing on the field for the 49ers in a real game. So we know that running back position's brutal. Evan Anderson, he could make the team. Cody Schrader could make the team. So I don't think that it's too far-fetched to assume that those guys, while they're probably happy to be drafted by the UFL, their focus is going to be making an NFL team and then using the UFL as a backup. That would be my thinking there.
I agree with you 100%.
The next one is, will Dominic Pooney play much this year? There is the chance that he could take over a starting position, or he could just kind of do like Aaron Banks and just be a backup all season. What do you think about that? What do you think is going to happen with Dominic Pooney?
Well, I think he's more ready to go right now than Aaron Banks was in his rookie year, because Banks' real struggles had to do with lateral quickness, and we know he changed his body going from year 1 to year 2, and I think that really served him well. I think with Dominic Pooney, you're not seeing those same sort of issues. His lateral quickness is not in question. He's still big and physical. How quickly will he adapt to the 49ers run game and being able to run block, I think is going to be the biggest question. But I think it all comes down to health. If Aaron Banks and John Feliciano and Jake Brendel are healthy, I think the likelihood is you don't see much of these guys this year, especially Dominic Pooney. I think it would be more of a redshirt year. I think at some point they're going to get him taking left guard reps as he'll start the season battling Spencer Burford, and they'll see what happens there. But I think at some point he'll get left guard reps just in case Aaron Banks goes down, because the cool thing about John Feliciano last year was he could handle all 3 roles on the interior offensive line. He could play right, left guard, or he could play center. With Spencer Burford, he's more of a right guard. I mean, that's basically what they've made him his entire career. And so you would have to potentially flip Feliciano to left guard. I guess you could do that in the starting lineup, but I think getting Pooney some extra reps could be interesting, but I think he's going to be 4 on the depth chart when it comes to offensive guard, behind Feliciano, behind Aaron Banks, and behind Spencer Burford.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Next storyline. These are for the rookies. What role will Isaac Guerendo play this season? There's talk that he could end up being the kick returner. He could be a backup running back. Maybe he doesn't even make the team right out of the gate. Maybe he ends up on the practice squad. But I would think being taken as high as he was taken, they probably aren't going to want to risk putting him on the practice squad. So what role do you think that he might play?
Well, I think he's another guy that could, potentially find an avenue to get on, more carries and things by what happens with injuries. Elijah Mitchell gets hurt, pretty much every single year. And I think that that's going to be the key. If Elijah Mitchell stays healthy with Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, and Christian McCaffrey, there's no real opportunity for carries in the football game for Isaac Guerendo his rookie season. So carving out a opportunity in special teams could be his best way to be active on game day. I think there's a likelihood that we won't see much from Guerendo this year at all, that it actually might be a redshirt season and just in case of injury type situation, because they know that, probably Elijah Mitchell is going to be gone next year. And then Isaac Guerendo can step in and be that big physical, fast running back they're looking for that has, the explosiveness to play behind McCaffrey. So to me, I don't think Guerendo is going to make much of an impact this year unless it's on special teams. And I hope that's the case because I don't want any injuries. But I also don't think he's at risk of not making this football team either. I think he's going to make this football team. 49ers have a lot of strength there. I don't know. I think Cody Schrader is going to look really good. But I just don't think it's going to be enough to, go ahead and beat out a guy that has 4.3 speed and they're really, really high on. So to me, I think it's going to stay status quo at the running back position.
Is there a chance that Cody Schrader could outplay Guerendo?
Yeah, I think 100%. If you look at Cody Schrader's ability to read holes and then just explode through gaps, he's got a better feel than Isaac Guerendo does for running the football. It's the other intangibles, the explosiveness, the whole shot ability that Guerendo has. That's why I think redshirt makes a lot of sense for him. If you needed someone to produce in year one, you probably would say Cody Schrader has a better chance to produce in year one. If you're talking about the longevity of a rookie contract, I would think Isaac Guerendo, as long as he can pick up the one cut and read, feeling that how comfortable it is in gaps, he'll have the better shot. Guerendo does remind me of Elijah Mitchell as far as when he was coming in. The difference was Mitchell figured it out real quick. Trey Sermon could never figure it out, but Elijah Mitchell figured it out real quick and got downhill very fast. And if Guerendo can do that, then potentially he could start changing some people's minds and getting some real attention.
The next storyline, how does Tatum Bethune, the linebacker, make the 53-man roster?
Well, I think it starts out, number one, with the injury to Dre Greenlaw, leaving an opportunity for him to be on the roster early on in the season. I think that you've got the potential there with him being on, the IR or the NFI or whatever he ends up being on. A PUP list, I think it is. I get mixed up on all the different ones, but the PUP. Yeah. Then what happens is you have that roster spot. Devondre Campbell, D. Winters are likely going to be on the team. Then you got questions. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, Jalen Graham. Well, if Tatum Bethune is showing some real signs of being a guy that they like, and he's doing well on special teams, that's his avenue to make the team, is special teams. He's got to show that he can do something there, and then he can kind of hang around this roster. And I think that's what the 49ers are hoping he's going to do. And I hope he does, because I see a lot of ability with Tatum Bethune. I watched him play a lot in college, and so I'm hoping he can find that avenue. At some point, Dre comes back, and the 49ers have to make a decision on what they do with the linebackers. But I would love Bethune, Jalen Graham, and D. Winters to put a lot of pressure on the 49ers to keep all three young players, because having a new wave of young linebackers, I think, is important and could save the 49ers money eventually with not having to bring back guys like Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. When you have young players that can step in, not having to sign Devondre Campbell to a second contract, and then all of a sudden you can pay all those resources to Dre Greenlaw, to Fred Warner, and have a lot of young players around that do some things. So I think that's an avenue for Bethune to make the team.
Yeah, and don't feel bad about getting confused over those. When I do the on Saturdays during the season, I always have to write whenever the 49ers release their roster updates, like so they promote somebody from the practice squad. They'll usually promote a couple of players. And a lot of times there's a player that's been on PUP or been on NFI or whatever, and I always have to look those up and write out what the PUP list means. And so even though I do that all the time, I still I'm like you. I get them confused and have to look those up. Here's the last one. Will any undrafted free agent make the 53-man roster?
I don't think so. And I know a lot of people are pushing for Evan Anderson to make this team. And I think that there's always a chance, right? I think that it really comes down to, can he impress more than Kalia Davis? Can he impress more than Kevin Givens? He only probably has to be one of them out in particular. But to me, I just think it's really tough. You got Schrader's dealing with Garindo ahead of him, and Garindo was a 4th-round pick. You're dealing with some of the other guys, the offensive linemen. There's a lot of young guys. Jared Kingston's ahead of Mays. Mays has got Nugent as well, and Nugent is an undrafted free agent. He's got so many guys ahead of him. This roster is just so stacked. I don't see very many opportunities for these undrafted free agents. I think the one that's probably got the best shot is Evan Anderson, and even then, I don't honestly think it's going to happen. I think the 49ers, this is one of those years they don't have any of them make the team. The roster's too good, and they've continued to add depth in the draft. They continue to add depth in free agency. They've got veterans at key positions. They're a win now football team. So would I love for Evan Anderson to show up, impress, beat out Kalia Davis, beat out Kevin Givens, and be that guy? Absolutely. Do I think it's likely? No.
Of the players who will likely end up on the practice squad, which are most likely to be plucked by another team?
I think a guy like Evan Anderson could be plucked. I think that people will see him and see potential there for them to go ahead and grab him. I think someone like Drake Nugent, depending on how he plays during preseason, I think there could be some opportunities there. So yeah, I mean, and then we don't know what's going to happen with tight end. I think if you cut, one of those guys, Braden Willis or Cameron Latu, there's probably a team around the league that picks him up and takes a shot, because tight end depth around the league is not great. So I think there's a likelihood 2 or 3 guys the 49ers try to get, through waivers and onto their practice squad end up getting picked up. It's just, when you're looking at a team with embarrassment of riches, you're going to go ahead and pluck their team and see if it works out. The thing is, it mostly didn't. You look at last year, Quantrez Knight, he went to the Arizona Cardinals. It worked out for him, but it didn't work out for Il Manning. So it's kind of a hit and miss when you're taking players, because if you claim them, they have to go on your 53-man roster initially. So I think it does happen, but if they don't make the 49ers 53, well, that's just kind of how it goes.
I agree with you on Evan Anderson. Josh said Drake Nugent. I definitely think that would be a possibility. I also think that Cody Schrader is one that we could. I mean, he led the SEC in rushing. That is a big thing, and it's not something to be overlooked. I still am surprised that he didn't get drafted, but I think that there are some good players that went undrafted that could potentially make the team or get plucked. I tend to agree with you. I don't think that any of these guys are going to make the team, but they may get picked up by another team. So Roberto said Niners roster is hard to make because the team is Super Bowl quality. So yeah, that's the problem for that. Like Rob's comment here, red and bold until I'm dead and cold. Hey, so we appreciate that. Anything else before we take off here, Ant?
No, I'm just excited. I really am. I mean, we're talking about actual football, and this is going to be great. Training camp, it's going to be a blast, and I'm looking forward to getting out there and watching and seeing these players. And I just can't wait, because we've got a real opportunity as a 49ers football team to win a Super Bowl. And I know I said we because I feel like I'm a part of it right now. It's so cool. But yeah, there's going to be cool storylines. All the rookies how they're going to react, how the new players are going to respond. And then we're just around the corner from preseason. August 10th is going to be here before we know it. And the 49ers are going to be starting preseason. We're going to get our eyes on some of these young players. And these training camp battles are going to be decided on the field where it should happen. And that's what I'm excited about. Real football is almost here. And I can't wait for it.
Are you going to make it to any of the training camp practices?
Yeah, so far I have already secured a couple of dates. I was able to get some dates. Really appreciative to people that are helping me out, and then I'm going to try to get a couple of more as well, so that way I can get out there as much as possible and just get a clear eye. I wanted some at the beginning. I wanted some with pads. It's hard for me to make it out every single day. I did that already, almost died. So I think that I'll get out there as much as I can. But yeah, I'm gonna get an eye on these guys. So it'll be fun because I'll be able to bring my actual real insight of what I'm seeing, to the show, so we can talk about it, because it's one thing to hear about it sometimes, and it's another thing to actually see it with your eyes. And the coach in me really takes off when I start seeing it. And I'm like, I will pay attention to things that I don't know if people pay attention to. It's me. I was offensive guy. I coach line. I've coached every position, but I'll watch footwork for I don't know how long. So a boring drill for everyone else is exciting for me as I'm sitting there watching footwork and seeing how they do it. So I just can't wait to see it. I miss that part of football. I always enjoy training camp.
Well, I will. I look forward to hearing what you're seeing from those practices. I'm not in California, so I have a better chance of making it to the Bears training camp practices, and I have no interest in going to the Bears training camp practices, although it might be cool to go watch Caleb Williams. I had a friend that worked for Anderson University in Anderson, Indiana, where the Colts used to have their training camp practices, and he invited me to come down because he was kind of in charge of the training camp from the university's standpoint. And he invited me to come watch a Colts practice when Frank Gore was there. And I almost did it, but wasn't able to work it out with my schedule. But I told him, hey, tell Frank that I miss him. And he said, okay. And later I talked to him and said, hey, did you tell Frank that I missed him? And he looked confused. And then he goes, oh, yeah, Mark, I told him. And I said, all right, what did he say? And he goes, he said he misses you too. So I knew that he was lying, but it still was fun to talk about that. I should have just made a point to go because he was going to introduce me to Frank Gore, and that would have been pretty cool. So, but I really didn't care. I think this was when Andrew Luck was the quarterback of the Colts. So that would have been pretty cool to go see, but I didn't do it. So anyway, but hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. Let's say thank you for everybody that's in the chat. Freddie, thanks for the comment. He said, love the inside of you too. We appreciate that. Let's see, Raphael, any news of the 49ers Saints joint practice? Will it be open to the public? I know that the dates were released, but I don't know. Is that one open to are those open to the public?
I have no idea. I know that, a couple years ago, the Chargers had it open to the public. I know last year it was very difficult for media members at the Raiders even. It was like a stressful experience. So I haven't heard if they're going to have it open at UC Irvine. That's where the Saints hold their training camp. So I don't know for sure. I'm sure that'll get announced probably pretty soon. Like you said, the dates just got released. I think it would be pretty cool if they opened it to the public. So that way some of the content creators can get down there as well, because that's when you get some good film on it. You get the reporters down there as well, and we'll get to hear their reports. But I think that would be cool if they did that. I just don't know if they will.
And for those wondering why the Saints are doing their training camp in California, it's because it's 800 degrees in Louisiana, and nobody wants to be in full pads in that mess. That's why. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hope that you have a great rest of your week. The next time we talk, it's going to be the real thing. Training camp will be open. The whole team reports next week. So looking forward to that. Have a great week, Ant. Have a great week, everybody. See you next week.